You guys all right? Good. You gotta know my red band here. I'm at Disney all week with the family. So for the past 3 days, I've shot over here to do a presentation only to go back. And this is the biggest block of downtime right now that I have all week. Right now. So pretty excited to be here. Pretty cool that I get to talk to you guys and share this message as well. I do want to share a quick story with you from last night at Disney World. So my wife is a total analytical supporter. And if you know personality profiling, you know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I'm clearly not an analytical supporter. She had the entire week of Disney mapped out on a spreadsheet. Okay? Every single thing we were going to do. And she started the trip the morning before the flight with a PowerPoint at home. I kid you not. It's what we're going to do, and we're going to go to Ariel's Grotto, and then we're going to go to the teacup party, and then I have a 5-year-old daughter, so you can imagine what my week at Disney's looking like with my wife, my 5-year-old daughter, and her mother. That's the foursome that I have going on here. Different foursome than you might be thinking of. So yesterday was the Magic Kingdom day. So I came over here, right? My day when I present usually starts with I like to get up and go for a run in the morning, kind of clear my head. So I get up, 5 o'clock, went out for a run around downtown Disney. Amazing what happens behind the scenes at Disney when they're not open during park hours. Just sidebar. Be cool for you to check that out. The leaf blowing and how polite the leaf blowers are and stuff. Very cool. Got showered, came in here, did a presentation at 8 o'clock, 9:30, jump in the car, go to the Magic Kingdom, and that's really when the day starts. So you can imagine if you've done it as an adult, right, it's kind of exhausting. So you go through all this, and we're stationed, and we're fast-paced. So my wife, you know, she set it all up. We swipe, and we don't stand in line, and we go over here, and then we're going here. And I said, when are we stopping for lunch? And she said, oh, no, I have a Cliff Bar for you. So we're not stopping for lunch. I have a Cliff Bar for you. And I'm looking at her 65-year-old mom going, are you cool with a Cliff Bar? Because I'm not cool with a Cliff Bar. Dude, back to back kind of stuff, right? And then it's like, okay, dinner. Awesome. Dinner is right by the Magic Kingdom. I forget the name of the restaurant, but it was literally right by where they're going to light the whole thing up. And so I'm so excited to be able to just stop moving. And it's freezing, by the way, at Disney. Not prepared for that. I did bring my Gordy sweatshirt. You'd be proud of that. Yeah. So I did have my red sweatshirt on. And so I'm finally like, okay, we're going to sit down, and we're going to have dinner. And I'm just going to sit. I'm going to have a cocktail. It's going to be awesome. And then we're going to watch the light parade. Okay. So the guy comes up, and Raul's name tag says that he is from Haiti. I'm like, hey, Raul, how are you? And you know, you scan this thing, and he knows everything about you now. Oh, hi, Mr. Sam from 6946 Littleton Drive. Right? And that's frightening in its own right. But then he says, what can I get for you? And I said, 2 fingers of your best whiskey and 2 cubes of ice. And he looks back at me and he says, we don't serve alcohol in the park. Magical fantasy vacation. And I have to buy a flask, apparently. So I figure I'd butter him up a little bit. Like, oh, you're from Haiti. I've been to Haiti a few times on a cruise ship to Labadee, where you see the good part of Haiti. And I really love it, and the waters are beautiful, and I'm smoothing them over, right? As I'm reaching in my wallet, I pull out 2 $20 bills, and I put my finger on it. And I said, Raul, I think you and I both know that you have something in a bottle back there. And I think you need to pour it into a cup. And it can be Mickey Mouse ears. Bring that out here. I think that's going to happen. I thought this was going over perfectly. And he looks down at me and he says, this is Disney World, not Prohibition. Not happy with Mickey Mouse at the moment. So after this, I will be running back over there to finish our day at the Magic Kingdom because we have Epcot lined up for tomorrow. So that's kind of how my week's going. But I'm really excited to be here with you guys, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic. This is very near and dear and sincere to my heart. I think a lot of times we sit here and talk about business process and structure and mechanics and how do we drive best business practices and more marketing and advertising. And that ESI, which is something I came up with, just because I don't think we look at it enough, as in Employee Satisfaction Index. I don't know that we really spend enough time on that. We talk about how to market to bring more customers in, and we talk about having a great sales process, all of which I'm for. I'm a huge fan of that. How do you have an amazing experience inside your store? But if your people aren't happy internally, a lot of things fall by the wayside. So I really want to explore with you how your ESI affects your CSI, which I think is really important to most of you out in the room. Cobalt focuses on a net promoter score. A lot of your manufacturers have some incentives tied into your CSI, your Customer Satisfaction Index. Harley-Davidson, if you're interested, has the allocation of motorcycles tied to the CSI score. That's how important it is for Harley, which is like holding your inventory ransom for a CSI score, which is why you have guys around the country with a bunch of Mont Blanc pens in a little cup and a sign that says pen for a 10. You're like, you can't do that. I can't. What do you mean pen for a 10? Well, Mr. Customer, we sure would love 10s. If there's any reason you couldn't give us a 10 on our survey, we'd sure love to know now. And if you can give us 10s, we'd sure love for you to have one of our Mont Blanc pens. Really? We're going to buy our way into good CSI scores? Okay. Interesting. Not that I'm opposed to that little conversation, banter about we sure would appreciate perfect 10s, but we shouldn't have to do it. That's ultimately what I'm after. We shouldn't have to buy those scores. What if they just happened? And if you think about who sends their surveys back in, think about your own experiences. When would you send a survey back in? And I'll just answer that for you. You're probably either amazingly over the top happy, right? Or you're really upset with somebody or something, right? Oh, I'm going to tell them how I feel. You bet I'll fill that survey out. 1, 2, 1, 1. Not to be confused with 10, 9, 10, 10, right? That's when you fill them out. So all of a sudden, the conversation around CSI scores is, how are you holding me accountable to a score that's really not a true indicator of what happens inside the store? Because I have the mad people filling out the surveys or the people who are over the top happy filling out the surveys. Well, let me tell you something about Disney World. Do you know why people go back to Disney World? It's not because of some gimmick or some sales pitch or some thing that they put out there, free hotel room if you stay the week. It's because people love going to Disney World. And the experience at Disney World is quite amazing. Here as an adult with a child, it's a whole different experience than I've had in years past. I've been here for business on my own, and that's just not the same. The experience is over the top. And I'm going to tell somebody about it, that it was very good, except for that damn whiskey in the park. Over the top experience. The leaf blower this morning, moving out of my way, shutting down the leaf blower as I'm running through downtown Disney. It's not even open yet. Please come on through. It's good to see you again this morning. Wow, okay, thanks. I got the breakfast and I'm walking back with my wife and the guy says, good morning, guys, welcome home. As we're walking to our room carrying our breakfast, welcome home. How do you get that from all your employees? How do you get it to where you're walking around thinking, yeah, this was really expensive and it's worth it? And it's worth it. So that's where we're going. That's what I want to talk to you guys about today. I think we'll have a little bit of fun along the way. How many of you have seen one of my other sessions before? Awesome. So you know all that crap. We don't have to talk about it. At the bottom, that 2015 Sam's Doc, that is, in 2012, we launched Sam's Power Sports Garage, which is an online training website for all employees other than a technician. Because God knows I don't know how to spin a wrench on anything. I know how to talk about spinning a wrench, but I can't spin a wrench. So the training for mechanics is not on there. And for the third year now that I've come back to this event, I'm blown away by how identical the industries are, marine industry and power sports. They're literally carbon copy mirror images of each other. What happens inside your departments, in fact, the sales department, service department, butt heads, that happens all day long in the power sports industry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of those training videos, and they're roughly 7-minute long segments, and we're going to move it into a marine space. I've got a big chunk of December blocked out to film in a marina and move a lot of the content into the marine industry, and we're going to launch that in Q1. So if you're interested in something like that, send me an email, let me know. I'll shoot you some information when it comes out. I've got cards down front for anyone who wants this presentation. If you've sat through my presentations before, you know I'm a big fan of take this home and show it to your staff. So if you want this presentation, send me an email. I know MDCE is going to have a copy, but if you want me just to email it directly to you, I'll email you the PDF only because of size restraints of email. But if you want the PowerPoint itself, I'll zip it and send it to you as well. Okay? So let me know. If you want some of that, grab one of my cards on the way out the door. The last slide will also be my contact information. Okay, here's where we're going. What drives your employees? Really, what drives them? And I know a lot of people say money. Money's number 4 on the list out of the Deloitte Shift Index as far as what drives people or why they left their jobs. It's not number 1, it's number 4. Anybody know what number 1 is? Respect is part of it. Recognition is up in the top. Number 3, or in 2012, lack of training was number 1. In 2013, bad management was number 1. But at the end of the day, if you're a manager and you're trying to hold me accountable to something I didn't know I was supposed to do because you didn't give me a job description and you're not giving me attaboys along the way, I think my manager sucks. Well, it's not that my manager sucks. It's that you didn't tell me what to do and you didn't tell me I'm doing a good job. So we'll talk about what drives them, the power of that emotional brain. If you've heard me talk before, you know that I talk about that emotional side of the brain fires at a faster pace than the logical side of the brain. That's what's happening with your employees when they come to work. When they wake up and they say, I get to go to work today or I have to go to work today. It's the emotional side of the brain telling them. Logically, it's a good job, it's got really good benefits, but emotionally, do I want to go there? The concept of team over self, right? The cohesiveness of your team over the individual self. Not necessarily team pay plans. I'm not a fan of team pay plans, but I love the teamwork concept. How all human beings are wired. And then how do we drive some of that in when we get home? How do we drive some of that respect for your employees? How do we drive some of the emotional side of the fence? And more importantly, why don't we ever talk about it? A lot of you are involved in 20 clubs, and we don't talk about the emotional health of your employees. I don't think. We don't devote much time to it if we do. So here's the question, all right? And you heard it in the intro. Why won't they do it? Why do you have a staff member that walks in from the parking lot and steps over the cigarette butt sitting on the ground? Why don't they pick it up? Haven't we talked a million times about you picking that thing up? Why don't you just pick the damn thing up? Why don't they do it? End of the day, two ways to influence human behavior. There's manipulation and inspiration. There are literally only two ways to get somebody to do what you want them to do. All right? That's it. Two ways. I can inspire you to do what I want you to do, or I can manipulate you to do what I want you to do. A lot of you have probably been inspired to do something in your life. Maybe your dad or a father figure or your mom taught you how to be a great mother, or Benjamin Franklin, whoever, somebody dead or alive has inspired you to be a better person, have a stronger work ethic, be a better athlete. Somebody's inspired you along the way. They didn't pay you to do it. That would have been a manipulation. You were inspired to do it. And I always think about John F. K. in the space program. Right? When he said we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him home safely before the end of the decade, that was crazy when he said it. It was absolutely ridiculous when you think of the technology they had back then. Right? Today we have these cell phones and they do everything. Everything my wife planned is on that phone. It's a Disney app, and we can change it and tweak between it. They have more technology on the phone right now than they had in all of NASA when he said, let's shoot a man to the moon and bring him home safely. So imagine me saying, hey, build a rocket, shoot some dude to the moon, bring him home safely, splash him down in the water with your phone. Go ahead, figure it out. Really? But back then think about that. They didn't have phones, they didn't have calculators. They had pencils and protractors and rulers. We're going to put a rocket together and fire a guy to the sky and splash him down in the water, and he's going to live through that? People were inspired to move to Florida to be part of the space program, right? That's inspired behavior. They didn't do it because the paycheck was so awesome. It wasn't. It sucked. And they didn't do them because, it was a cushy 30-hour-a-week job. No, it was like a 70-hour-a-week job. And they're all in cubicles, and everyone's smoking, and they're all wearing skinny ties, bad fashion. No, they were inspired to be part of something bigger, right? That's inspired behavior. Very different than manipulated behavior. Manipulation and inspiration. Manipulation is when I manipulate the circumstance somehow to get you to do what I want you to do. Okay, you can have a cookie when you finish your homework is a manipulation, right? Any kind of manipulation. What do you think number one manipulation in retail is? Give them a discount. If I chop the price, I'll manipulate the situation enough that you'll take that home. Okay, let's do it. That's a manipulated transaction. It is the most talentless way to run a business, is to drop the price. It is the most talentless way. And if that stings a little, I hope it did. It was meant to. I want it to sting a little bit. Because I want you to inspire people to want to do business with you, not have to manipulate people to want to do business with you. No doubt manipulations work. They drive transactions. You want to drive transactions? Run a half price something. Run half price underwater lights and watch how many transactions you get that come into the store. But if the guy just comes in the store, buys some lights at half price, we spent payroll dollars to move that product out. Did we win? No, we just drove a transaction. Doesn't mean the transaction was a good one. But inspiration drives loyalty. And that's what we're after. Right? So you think now you take that whole format with your customer and you turn it internally. I can manipulate you to do what I want you to do. Here's a spiff. Here's a bonus. Here's a % commission. Here's a day off. Here's a demo ride. Here you go, Mr. Employee. All manipulations. And I'm not against any of those. Understand that. But understand they are manipulations. Or I can inspire you to want to work here, to get excited to come to work, to be part of a company that's growing, to be part of a company of people who actually care about you. That's a different thing. That drives loyalty. You start talking about staff turnover, wonder which one needs more attention. I don't believe in my heart, I truly don't believe in my heart that any employee has ever come to work and said, God, I hope I suck today. I don't think they do it. Now, if you immediately have a picture of one employee in your mind, you probably should have fired him a month ago, right? But I think most people come to work and they want to do well. They want to be awesome. They want to succeed. They want to win. I think humans in general have a universal desire to win. But what's winning? Have you told them? Have you given them a job description? Do you keep score? Do you know that 1.9 line items per ticket is below the national average? I want you to be at 2.3 or above. Attaboy, today you're at 2.4. I want to win, but have you told them what winning looks like? Have we congratulated them when they are winning? Okay, so we have to look internally at our staff. And the answer, it's interesting because I was doing this exercise, and that's a bummer, that's so dark. That was a real flip chart, and I'll just explain to you guys what's on it so you don't have to strain yourself. In the middle of the flip chart, I was in Vermont, and I was working with a dealership in Vermont. And I wrote in the middle, why won't they do it? ? And I put a circle all the way around it. And I said, okay, staff, give me answers. Why won't, and it was a manager's retreat, said, managers, why won't your staff do what we want them to do? And all the answers that come to your head are the same ones that came into their head. Oh, they don't want to. They feel entitled. The management doesn't care about us. They're only looking for the money. Every answer you can think of that comes to your mind is why your staff doesn't want to do what you want them to do came up. And they were all the way on the outside of the perimeter. My way is better. Selling is bad. There's no trust in us. Screw you. What is it? I don't care. Product knowledge. It's a job, not a career. Right? You can see some of your staff saying these things. And then one girl put her hand in the air, the quietest girl in the room, and she said, they just don't want to. They just don't want to. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, at the end of the day, they may know what's right. They don't care. They just don't want to. See, as an owner, you want to pick up that cigarette butt because the reputation of the store is important enough to you to want to pick it up. It's not that you actually want to pick it up. I don't think you're really excited to go outside and pick up cigarette butts. But I think it means enough to you to make you want to do it. And to your frontline staff, it doesn't. And if you can't see that, that's a picture of Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn in that movie, The Breakup. Remember The Breakup? They're sitting on the couch, right, and they're in New York City. And she just got done throwing a fit in the kitchen because they had friends over and there are all these dishes. And she's crying and she's like, I just want you to want to do the dishes. And Vince Vaughn, in his perfectly sarcastic tone, says, who wants to do the dishes? Right? Remember that scene? Nobody wants to do the dishes. She wants it to matter enough to him to want to do the dishes. And that's the rub with your staff. If it just doesn't matter enough to them to want to please you, they just don't do it. They know they should do it. If you're looking, they'll do it. But what about when you're not looking? What about when you're not there? Okay? So here's our current situation. And that's an amazingly sad statistic to me, which is 80% of people in this country do not like their jobs. That's straight out of the Deloitte Shift Index. They track the shift in worker satisfaction, why people left jobs, things like that. 80% of the people in this country don't like their jobs, which is amazing to me. It's sad to me, but if you think about a lot of your friends, you know that you have a lot of people that go to a job that they're not happy about, right? You know that to be true. In our industry, it doesn't seem to be true because I think people left that corporate job to come play in our industry, and we're probably 20% of our industry might not like their jobs, and 80% of us love it because we left that corporate job to come here. But this is what's going on. The guy that's coming in to buy that next Yamaha jet boat, he's at a job that he probably doesn't like. Statistically, he doesn't like. So think about this internally with your staff. Is it possible that they fall into the 80%? And how is it that we constantly focus on being smarter without being healthier? Why do we go to 20 clubs and learn the best business practices to be smarter and run a smarter business when we spend so very little time looking internally and being healthy? Where's my Iron Man? Had an Iron Man Louisville shirt on. Is there a difference between being fit and being healthy? There really is, isn't there? And anyone who's ever trained for an athletic event, you know that you can eat all the right foods, or you can work out all the time, or you can do both. And I think there are a lot of people in this room that maybe you work out like an animal, but then you go home and have a bag of Cheetos. Not that I'm guilty of that. Or you never work out, but you eat all the right foods. Man, you eat your green vegetables and you have your shakes and your proteins and your quinoa and your all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to run an Ironman, you better put those two together. You want to run a really successful dealership. You want to ring the towel and be the best. You can't just have a smart dealership. You have to have a healthy dealership that goes with it. Okay? There's a great book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni that really maps that out. The differences between a smart dealership and a healthy dealership. The Advantage. If you've heard of Lencioni, he wrote several books out there. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Obsessions of a CEO, things like that. And I'll reference him one more time before we're done. Now that form on the left is just a 3-part commitment form coming out of one of my 20 clubs. That one happens to be a Triumph 20 club that I'm running. And it's just basically, if you come to a 20 club, at the end of the meeting, I would like for you to turn in a sheet to me saying, what are the 3 things you're going to do between now and the next meeting, 4 months from now? 3 things. I don't want 10, I want 3. Because if you give me 10, you're going to get 0 of them done. I'd rather you give me 1 than give me 10. But usually most people can get 3 done in between meetings. And for those of you, show of hands how many of you are in a 20 club, 20 group of some fashion, right? It's amazing to me that you're the guys that come to the training, and thank you for coming. It's all the other people that need it so badly, and you're the ones that are here. So I love the fact that you're here. But when you go to a meeting, you know that there's the same person who comes in every single time like, oh, I didn't get that done. Well, why not? Oh, I just couldn't get it done. And so it's on the implementation sheet again and again and again and again. And we get exhausted when it comes time for that person's composite review because they never seem to implement it. And I've always wondered why they can't come to the meeting and implement it. I now know. I know it's because they don't have a healthy dealership. They're trying to drive a smart practice into an unhealthy dealership, and it won't work because the employees just don't want to. Neocortex and the limbic brain, right? You got 3 major parts to the brain. Your reptilian complex is your fight or flight mode. But your neocortex is where all your thinking happens, and your limbic brain is where all of your emotions happen. Yesterday I mentioned in the presentation that I actually learned this from the speaker at the Mercury keynote event. And then I went and referenced him on, not him, but I fact-checked him online just to make sure he's telling the right stuff. On the logical level of the brain, 2,000 neurons per second are firing. When you made the conscious decision to come to this seminar, you made that decision while 2,000 neurons per second were firing in your brain. On the emotional level, on your limbic or this feeling part of the brain, 8 billion neurons per second are firing on your emotional brain. So you sit here and you think about when you make decisions in your life that are part logic and part emotion, which side do you think your brain is going to favor on that decision? It's going to lean towards emotion. We make so many emotionally based decisions out there, it's absolutely incredible. Why do we eat cheeseburgers? Well, it tastes pretty good. Why do we gamble? Oh, that rush. Yeah, but you know the house wins, right? Logically, all the numbers tell you the house wins. That's all right. I'm still going to bet on FSU. It's just going to do it. Not Auburn, Anthony, not this year. Why do we do the things we do? Because our emotional brain is kicking in. Think about so many of the decisions you make with your emotional brain. Right? Why do we overpay for a house? We're house hunting, and then all of a sudden you find the one you really want, and you're like, what? That's not inside the price bracket. Oh, but there are chocolate chip cookies cooking when we walked in. Smells like home, right? Statistically, people will overpay 20% for a house that they bought at an open house when there are chocolate chip cookies cooking in the oven because it feels like home. Now, logically, that doesn't make any sense at all. But you're not making that decision with your logical brain. You're making it with your emotional brain. That's why we eat the foods we eat. It's why we do all the crazy things we do. You know what my bento box is full of on race day? I like to race the short distance triathlon, not Ironman stuff, but Cheetos. That's a little food basket on your bike, and I'll be riding around, this is the picture you're going to get. 3 days you've been in my room, and that's the one you take. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just do it then. So I'm laying down on the triathlon bike with my arms in the aero bars and my bag full of Cheetos. So you get out of the water, you get on the bike, and you're riding the bike to get ready for the run, and the little food box is to refuel to get ready for the run. And I'm full of Cheetos, right? And I'm here like, and guy comes up next to me like he looks like a triathlete. I do not look like a triathlete. He looks like a triathlete. And he's got that skin suit and everything on. I'm like, hey, dude, what's up? Hey. And I'm thinking, I know he's thinking, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life, right? All I'm thinking is, what took you so long to catch me? Why would I have Cheetos on the bicycle in the middle of the triathlon? Because it feels good. Why do you think they call it comfort food, gang? Comfort food, because it feels good. And your emotional brain is overriding your logical brain. I promise it's the same thing with your employees. When they come to work, their emotional brain is making decisions for them that their logical brain may or may not be making. Decisions like, do I like it here? Does my boss respect me? Do my team members respect me? Don't ever underestimate the power of the emotional side of your brain. Simon Sinek, great book called Leaders Eat Last. It's a military reference to when a military leader goes through the chow line, his whole crew goes first and he goes last, because I got to take care of my team first. They're going to follow me into battle. They need to be happy, comfortable, I got your back mentality before I go through the line. In that book, you remember that from Meet the Fockers, right? Can I say that in Disney? Oh, we're not in Disney. Okay. Circle of Trust. The whole book references that people go to work and they want to trust the people they work with. Do you have my back? If I got sick, could you cover me tonight? Can I trust that you're there for me, or do I think you're going to throw me under the bus when the manager walks by? Wants to know why the display's not right. And if I feel like I'm outside of that circle of trust, guess what I do? I start looking for another job. If I feel like you trust me and you love me and we're all part of this whole family inside, different story. That feels good. Boy, this thing really came out dark. This is the picture from the movie 300. If you guys saw the movie 300, and I know you did, because they somehow brilliantly made that movie so that guys and girls love it. Right? For the guys, it's all about warfare, and that guy's kicking him into the pit, and he says, "We are Sparta!" And he kicks him into the pit, and every guy in here is like, "Yeah!" And for the women, you're like, "Oh my God, everybody in the movie's hot." I know that's what you're thinking. That whole battle, like when I got done with that movie, I was fascinated by how do 300 warriors defend thousands of other warriors. That's the whole movie, 300. The Battle of Thermopylae, King Xerxes and King Leonidas, bang, right? How is it that 300 warriors are defending themselves against all the other people out there? How can they do that? And they don't even have much. These guys are all crouched down behind their shields with their spears, okay? That's what's going on there. You remember that scene where the archers throw the arrows in and they all hide behind the shields like that? Well, what happens if one guy pulls his shield away? That's bad news for everybody. You've heard the weakest link, right? That's the weakest link, that whole chain falls apart. What's that? They don't have much. That's for you, ladies. They've got the spear and a shield and a helmet. But I don't think they're not fighting with a helmet. They're not, they're doing this with the spear and the shield. If they're killed, right? If you look up in history, if you're one of these warriors and you're killed in battle and you lose your spear and you're killed in battle, well, you're buried with all the other warriors and you're buried with honor. God forbid you lose your shield. You're buried out in the field and you're buried in disgrace. Who's the spear for? Spear's for you to defend yourself, kill some other people. Who's the shield for? Shield's for your mates. Shield's for everybody around you. You don't lose your shield. You don't lose your shield in battle. You get it, gang? This whole concept of infrastructure internally and being healthy as a team, it goes back a long, long way. Didn't start with your team. That one up top was PowerPoint. I don't know if you see the one down bottom, but this guy right here. I do a little work on the side, little movie stunts. Okay. Your body. How does your body recognize threat? It doesn't have to be a threat of somebody's going to kill me. It could be a threat of, I think you're going to lay me off, right? Whitehall studies. This is a 10-year study, Whitehall studies, and they were looking at executive stress syndrome. If you've ever heard of executive stress syndrome. What's really funny is on the 10-year span, they found out that the executives don't have as much stress as the frontline employees. Now think about that for a second. The executives, the CEOs, the CFOs, they're not as stressed as the receptionist and the frontline salesperson. How can that be? And as owners right now, I know what you're thinking as owners. You go to bed with this every night. Employee checks out at 5, comes back in the morning and starts all over and clears their head. Owners, you take it home with you, you live with it all the time. How can they be more stressed? They're not more stressed about the work, about your company. They're more stressed about, how am I going to put food on the table? I got 4 kids at home. How am I going to put Sally through college? They're carrying collectively more stress than you are, Mr. CEO. And it comes from this right here. Here was the finding. The less control, the greater the stress. If the employee is not in control of his or her future, that employee carries greater stress. You are guiding the ship. You get to decide where the ship goes. You deal with the results, the consequences of where the ship goes, but you get to make the call. Therefore, you're dealing with less stress than the frontline employee. So your employee is living with stress. CSI versus ESI, all right? The customer satisfaction index versus the employee satisfaction index. Why do we allow our employees to live with stress, therefore our ESI goes down? What you find out ultimately is that ESI is fueling your CSI. Why is ESI not as important as CSI? It's one of our Harley dealers in a big, huge, massive cookie. They do every quarter. This Harley dealer who's got 6 stores, they have an employee satisfaction day. This isn't a Harley dealer that they were maximizing profitability, and he consciously decided to take a step backwards in profitability to establish the culture he wanted internally with his staff, a career path, and a place to call home. And he knew he was suffering his profitability to do it because he knew it would return. It has returned. His profitability went away, not away. He dropped a point or two so that he could fix the culture inside the store and minimize the turnover of his staff. And now his profitability is right back to where it was, and he has the culture that he's looking for, where people are seeking him out from all over the country because he's the place to go. He's the guy to work for. Why is ESI not as important as CSI? And the reality is, when I go to a composite review and I'm looking at the book, well, that number's off. I got to fix that number. Our F&I number, whatever, your turns in your parts department. I don't care what it is. That number's off, I can fix it. And if I implement that best practice, I tweak that dial, this number comes up. And so as an owner, I'd rather focus on that because it's a number. It's an objective statistic that I can hit and I can fix. I can see progress. How my employee feels is not something that I can put a number on. I can't turn a dial and watch a number go up on this side. So a lot of owners don't spend any time focused on it because they can't quantify the results of a feeling. And look, let's be honest. There's a lot of ego in this industry. There's a lot of ego in this room right now. It's more fun to talk about what drives the numbers to the profitability of the store than it is the light and fluffiness of my staff. That's kind of a feel-good yay. How does my staff feel today? All right, but I know about Tom and Gordy's, you guys spend a lot of time focused on ESI. You may not call it ESI, you may never thought to call it ESI, but I know you do a ton of events for your staff to get the morale right internally because that pours over to the customer coming in the door. There's a bit of personality profiling that goes on. I won't dive deep into this just for the sake of time, but if you've ever been through any kind of personality profiling, whether it's Myers-Briggs or DISC profiling or whatever it happens to be, that's just the branded name. Like a tissue, right? Kleenex is the branded name for something called a tissue. DISC is the branded name for something called personality profiling. And at the end of it all, no matter which brand you go through, there are 4 generally accepted types of personality traits. There's a controller, a promoter, an analyzer, and a supporter. Right? So why is it that I have a hard time getting to know my staff? Sometimes it's really easy to get to know my staff, and we're best friends on day 1. And then sometimes it takes 3 months, and I can't even figure you out. Because if your staff member is your opposite personality type, we have conflict as we go across, right? That's a tough thing, trying to get to know somebody who's the opposite personality type. And so it's easier to focus on my F&I number than to go over here and talk to Johnny, who I don't even understand. Can't even get through to that guy. I don't understand it. So we spend more time focused on smart business than we do healthy business. But the healthy It's really where it's at. By the way, remember what I told you my wife was? She's an analytical supporter. I am a promoting controller. Guess how that relationship works? Slowly. If you're smart only, it'll cost you. If you just focus on being smart, it is the price you pay. And the biggest one is the cost of turnover. What I know about retail in general, all of retail, there's a 200% turnover in retail of staff. 200% annual turnover. That does not mean you're going to turn your entire staff over twice every year. That means you're going to have a core group of people that have been with you forever, and you're going to have some people who turn over frequently, because a lot of people see retail as a very transient position. And maybe that person makes his or her way into the core group, and then somebody falls off eventually down the line. So because these positions are turning over frequently, we have a high turnover. You think staff likes turnover? You think customers like turnover? They want to see the same people over and over again. If you focus just on being smart and not on being healthy, as light and fluffy as it may be, you have turnover of staff, and that's a problem. Lost sales, cost of advertising. The payroll needed to hire, right? Depending on the size of your business, this graph is going to mean different things to you, but I just want you really to look at the differences between 10, 20, and 33%. In other words, if you have a 10% annual turnover, this size of a business is costing them $3.6 million in sales, right? More importantly, if you go to 20%, it's double. You're doubling the dollar amount that you're losing. So if you have 20% turnover, you're losing twice as much money than if you had 10% turnover. That's the takeaway, right? And you can see it goes up again up to $12,000 when you get into the 30%. The key, gang, is to minimize the turnover. If you think about what it costs to place an ad, get the payroll necessary to field the phone call, to get somebody to come in, to interview them, and then you couple that with all of the lost sales and how long it takes to get a new person up to speed. Every time we've done that, we used to run management development programs, right? So I ran over 500 managers through a management development program, a 9-month-long course. During my tenure as the director of training, for a 9-month-long course, we ran over 500 managers through this, and we'd walk through this exercise with them, the cost of turnover. And ultimately, when you pencil out how much payroll is needed to run the ad, field the call, interview the person, how many lost sales do we have, you're talking about $25,000 per frontline position. Every frontline counter sales receptionist frontline position, when you start talking about a minimum of $25,000 in turnover, that can add up very quickly depending on the size of your business. So it's important to focus on minimizing the turnover. And I know there are a lot of places that use layoffs as a solution. Winter dealerships talk about, hey, you know what? When it comes to Christmas time, I can only keep 3 of you on board. I'm just going to keep the best 3 of you on board. I want you to think about the mindset and the stress that we put our employees under if they know that turnover and layoffs are coming. The Whitehall studies, the amount of stress goes up. We'll talk about what that ultimately does. And what's amazing is when capitalism thrives is when employees feel safe. When they feel safe, they perform above and beyond. Yes, pay plans are a huge part of it. But when they feel safe is when they want to contribute at all. That's when they want to pick up the cigarette butt in the parking lot. That's when they actually care. How's that for a transition slide? Chemicals of the brain that make us feel good. There are 4 of them in our brains that make us feel good. Dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, not to be confused with OxyContin, serotonin. Dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin. They have different effects on people. And you have to understand what each one of them does to understand what you're going to get from your staff member when one of them is firing. And if there's one that makes more sense, well, how do we create that? How do we get that one firing more than the other one? Dopamine and endorphins are for you, selfishly for you. They make you, the individual, feel better about yourself. Oxytocin and serotonin, much like 300, is about us. How do I make us feel better? To the point where I got your back. You got mine? It's a bonding agent. It's a gluing agent. Oxytocin and serotonin. I'm going to move on. I see some of you guys writing furiously. Don't forget, I'll give you the PowerPoint if you want. So the 2 chemicals that are for you, the first one, we got endorphins and dopamine. Endorphins mask pain. That's all they're designed to do. Good or bad pain. Right? If you go to work out and you like to burn and you like to be sore when you're lifting weights, that's a good pain. Endorphins are masking the pain so your body can rebuild itself underneath the surface. That's all that's happening. Bad pain. You go Paleolithic times, right? We're going to go hunt down a woolly mammoth. It took my guys 10 miles to hunt this thing down, and we finally drag him down to the ground. Well, now we got to drag a woolly mammoth 10 miles back to camp to feed the village. That's exhausting. How do I make you feel better about that? I flood you full of endorphins so you forget how tired you are, so forget how much pain you're in. Last night, before I sat down thinking I was going to get a whiskey, my body was pumping me full of endorphins. It's going to be okay. Endorphins are really nothing more. If you've ever heard of the runner's high, usually in the middle of a marathon, somewhere around mile 20, you're like, I'm falling apart. They say the marathon really starts at mile 20, and all of a sudden, wait, I got a second wind. There's no second wind. That's your body saying, this is horrible. Stop immediately. Here's some drugs to make it to the finish line. Masking your pain, that's all that's happening. It's some hippie in Boulder came up with that phrase. Endorphins mask pain. I think it's simple. I think we've all experienced that on some level. Dopamine is really, really interesting. This is a quick hit. It's a feel good. Oh, God, that felt really good. Quick hit feels really good right now. Okay? Again, Paleolithic times. I'm going to look out in the distance. I'm going to see a fruit tree. Wow, dopamine. Because your body is rewarding itself for wanting to go get food. See, your body doesn't know there's a 7-Eleven around the corner where you get some Cheetos. It just thinks, I'm hungry, I need to eat. If I don't encourage you to walk the 10 miles to get the food, we're going to die off as a species. So I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to give you a quick hit of dopamine. Oh, that feels good. I'm going to go get it. And every little bit closer, every mile you click off, more dopamine, until you get to the food and you eat the food and you get a mad rush of dopamine that's coming into you. Right? That's when your body, you feel good. Why is it we feel good when we eat? Because there's a chemical released in your brain making you feel good. Because your body is rewarding you for eating. The problem is people get addicted to eating because dopamine is addictive. Dopamine reinforces behavior. In that example, it was eating. Performance-based pay plans reinforce behavior. They release dopamine in the mind of your employee. It feels good until I spent it. And then they got to get it again. That's the thing about dopamine. You want it again and again and again and again. Whether it's a paycheck or it's a day off or it's a bag of Cheetos, it is a feel good for the moment. Now I need it again. Gang, people are designed to seek out people and things that make you feel good. That's how we're wired, to make you find people and things that make you feel good. Okay? You ever notice how if you're into whatever, shoes, and I'll just be very stereotypical and say women, because most women I know are into shoes. If you go out and you buy a nice set of shoes, what's the next thing you want? Another nice set of shoes. Why is that? Why is it that a guy gets a watch and he wants another watch? Why is it when you get the motorcycle you want, you want the next motorcycle? I don't know. It's how we're wired. It's a dopamine hit and it feels good and then it wears off. That new car feel is gone. I need another new car. They call it the itch. You get the itch. It's just the dopamine wore off and you need another hit of dopamine. It's all that's happening. The whole concept of tying your score to emotion, when I put the scoreboard up and you're tracking your line items per ticket in the parts and accessories world, it's a dopamine hit to make you feel good about my score. Oh, look at that, yeah. And you go down the road. When your team wins, it feels good in that moment, right? And then I think unless you're tracking your own team, a lot of people forget about all the other teams. Remember that game last weekend? Oh, God, who was that? Somebody got just cleaned out, right? And we forget about that. It was LSU, if you're wondering. They ended up with a goose egg. It is very addictive. Dopamine is very addictive, okay? You need it again and again and again and again. Now, if your whole deal with your employees is it's a good paycheck, it's a place to come to work, it's a nice environment, it's a feel-good-now moment, you're flooding your employee with dopamine, not necessarily serotonin and oxytocin. By the way, anyone know what the number one addiction in America is right now? It's social media. Number one addiction in America is social media. Very frightening to me. Right? With a soon-to-be 6-year-old daughter here next month, very frightening to me that the number one addiction is social media. 10 years ago, we didn't have social media. What's it going to be 10 years from now? I don't know. But I watched a Yahoo presentation in Las Vegas this year, and they said some crazy stuff about the generations. Right? You got the baby boomer generation. You got the Gen Xers, which up till 1976, right? If you're not a baby boomer, I think they said it was 1965 to 1976 as a Gen Xer, if you were born in those years. 1976 and 1992, Gen Y, 1992, present day, Gen Z or millennials, right? And they were talking particularly about the Gen Ys and how they use Facebook. But they did reference the millennials and how they consider the device that gets them on and off the internet as important as an arm or a leg. Just process that for a second. It's as important as an arm or a leg, to where there's now a neural connection happening where they don't, not only is the phone on them at all times, but it's in their hand. They can't put it down. And now we're hitting refresh. Because if you're a Gen Z, right, if you're a teenager, I must be more important than that. Nobody sent me an email. Refresh, right? All the times you post something on Facebook and someone likes your post, it's a hit of dopamine to you. Oh, look, I'm important. Somebody liked my post. I better respond right back. And you respond right back, and they get a dopamine hit. And it goes back and forth, right? That neural connection of refresh is because you're looking for another dopamine hit. Give me another hit. Give me another hit. This is Yahoo's slide. You see it in the bottom left corner. Don't tell them I stole it. 41% of teens say they're addicted to their cell phones. Bottom right-hand corner. Gang, chemically addicted. They're not defying you. They're addicted to the phone. They're not doing it in defiance. They're addicted, chemically addicted to their phone, and that is a very frightening thing. Understand the power of dopamine. It is a selfish, need it now thing. Go to Starbucks, watch 3 teenage girls sitting at the table, not one of them speaking to each other. They're all on their phones. They're all on social media, right? Because they're seeking out that dopamine hit, that feel-good right now dopamine hit. Very different from serotonin and oxytocin. Let's go to those other two. Chemicals for us, serotonin and oxytocin together equal trust, which if you've had any sales training in your life, you know how important that word trust is. Trust comes from a release of serotonin and oxytocin. It is a feeling. I feel like I can trust you. How do I feel that way? There's no logical reason to feel that way. It's those two chemicals being released in my brain, knowing that your emotional brain overrides your logical brain. Serotonin on its own is the feeling of pride. When you have pride in whatever it is you do, there's a release of serotonin. When you bring the woolly mammoth home and the people cooking it up in the village say, "Thank you so much for bringing this woolly mammoth home to our family," you have a feeling of pride. When you bring a paycheck home and your spouse says, "Thank you for working so hard," there's a feeling of pride. That is serotonin being released. And the cool thing is, it goes both ways. That's the really neat thing. Dopamine goes one way or the other. Serotonin goes both ways. When I say thank you for providing for the family, my spouse feels serotonin, I feel serotonin. It's released on both sides. And it's a feeling of pride. That was Florida State winning the national championship. And I was at that football game last year. We're not going to talk about Jameis Winston. I promise you, I got nothing to say about that guy. Tom knows, I'm sorry that Notre Dame lost to Florida State. I'm sorry about that, okay? But when I was sitting in the stands at the national championship, I went to Florida State, and I went there during a decade where we always won. We always won, okay? I graduated with Charlie Ward in 1993, and if Florida State wasn't in the top 5 every single year, it was a horrible year. I was depressed forever. Then you go 14 years of them being nothing to talk about, nothing. So when they made it to the national championship, it was a pretty big deal. And my wife actually looked at me when they figured out we're going to the national championship. She looked at me in the kitchen one day and said, "You got to go to that game." Which is one of those moments like, I totally married the right woman, right? Totally married the right woman. Spent God knows how much money on a ticket and a flight. I had a Ducati motorcycle waiting for me at LAX, jumped on it, raced up to the stadium. I'm sitting there with my brother. We're sitting in the stands. And if you know that game, Auburn was killing Florida State in the first half, spun it around. Florida State wins the game at the very end. And I'm just standing there, and I'm just looking around the room. And the feeling that was going around the stadium at that moment, it was absolutely crazy. It was electric, right? And there was a prideful feeling. There was pride when your team wins and being associated with that. That bleeds. It's very similar to the next one, which is oxytocin, which is a feeling of I belong. Not only do I have pride that my team won, but I feel like I belong to this herd and tribe. And as I tell you this, I hope you're applying it to your staff internally, and you can see where I'm going with this. Do they feel like they belong? Singleton Marine Group, do they wear it with pride? Or are they just wearing it because it's a uniform for the day, right? I belong to this herder tribe. This is a slow drip as opposed to dopamine, which is a quick hit. This is a slow drip. It's over time when you're married to the same person for long and you have that sense of we're never going to leave each other, that bonding thing, your best friends that have been with you since childhood. This is serotonin and oxytocin that's being released between you two, okay? That's the Ice Age Sid the Sloth clip right down there. Remember, he's the woolly mammoth and the Sid the Sloth and the saber-toothed tiger, and they're a very interesting herd. They're a very interesting tribe because they're all very not alike and they wouldn't normally hang out together, but they have that bond and they have that feeling with each other. I was standing in the stadium when Florida State won, looking around, and I was, I'm sitting there screaming like, oh my God, we did it, we did it, we did it. And my next thought was, what the hell did I do? I did nothing. I went, yeah, with a lot of beer, all right. That's all I did. But I felt like I belonged to this team, to this tribe, to this herd. And the feeling, you could cut it with a knife. The excitement that was in the stadium that day. And I think you've probably all been there when your team wins or maybe your kid's team wins. And that's a really cool feeling. That's what's missing in your stores. That connection on the serotonin and oxytocin level is what's missing. Remember before I said your employees are dealing with a lot of stress? Here's what stress is. It's important to understand that, right? So you got the scene in nature, these antelopes, and they're all eating. And I always think animals are like people. They're having these people conversations, right? So we're having some food. And it's like, hey, Tom, what are you doing later, man? I'm just going to eat this food right here. And then all of a sudden, Carl picks his head up, right? It's like, whoa, Carl heard something. Holy crap. Well, look at Carl. Carl's freaking out over there. And Carl is perfectly at attention. Totally heard something. Totally freaked out. This is what stress is. Your body is releasing cortisol into your system. And cortisol is designed to give you hyper-awareness. Your mind has dropped into fight or flight mode. Remember the third part of the brain? The neocortex, right? I'm sorry. You got the limbic and the neocortex and the reptilian complex. We share this with reptiles. It's fight or flight. This is what your brain just dropped into fight or flight, completely elevated heart rate, laser beam focus on whatever's in front of you. Because you may have to run. I don't know if you're going to run or I don't know what. There's a danger right there. I don't know what it is. I want all of your attention focused right there. This is what's going on when your body is experiencing stress, any kind of a stress, right? And then the cheetah pops out or the lion pops out or whatever that thing is. You got that National Geographic scene that plays out. Maybe he gets the antelope, but maybe he doesn't. And then what do the other antelope go back to doing? Yeah, well, that sucks about Carl, right? All the cortisol is gone. Like, whoa, I'm ready. Carl sees something, right? And the thing to remember is when one person sees it, everybody starts reacting to it. And they're all in that mode of, whoa, 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 something big's about to happen here. And then once it happens, cortisol's gone. We go right back to doing what we were doing before. The body's designed to elevate your heart rate, to keep you alive, and then release it. If you're constantly living with stress, the cortisol never goes away. It never goes out of your body, which means you're constantly living with an elevated heart rate and a laser beam focus on something. You think he's going to fire us? He just brought in a new employee. Do you think we're not pulling our weight around here? Whatever it is, it never goes away. And you never get the maximum performance out of that person. This is what happens when cortisol enters your body. And let me just read these to you. Decreased metabolism, depression, hypertension, chronic fatigue, sleep deprivation, migraines, tunnel vision, acid reflux disease, hostility, hunger, arthritis, and decreased immune system. Sound familiar to anybody? Like all your staff? And they're pounding monster drinks to get them to wake up in the morning? This is what happens when stress is in the body and never goes away. So it's imperative that you relieve the stress on the staff if you want to get the most out of them. They're living with too much cortisol. So you sit here and you say, well, what's better? Is it dopamine better than the oxytocin? And, I had a guy in one of my seminars that said, my staff is my biggest expense. And I said, wow, what your inventory, I think, is your biggest expense. He said, well, I need the inventory to make my sales. And I thought, do you hear yourself? Is it your biggest expense or is it your biggest asset? I think you have to have the inventory and amazing experience as a minimum price of admission. I think to run the business you're in with the competitors that every one of you has around you, you have to run it at that level. But the second you take your focus off of your staff and how important your staff is, you're losing a critical element as to what makes you different. I assure you, Disney World spends an incredible amount of time with their staff, long before they're ever even allowed to walk out there in the park. Slow down the process to speed up the sale. If you were sitting in my sales seminar 2 days ago, you remember I was talking about just slow it down. Spend more time in the greeting and the introduction. Slow it down to get to know who you're talking to. Because what happens in the greeting introduction is I give you a chance to tell me about you, and we get to bond, and we get to have a good time together. And what do you think's being released at that moment? Serotonin and oxytocin. As opposed to, let's just find the boat you want. Here we go. Dopamine. You want a customer for life? Focus on serotonin and oxytocin, not just dopamine. Great book if you haven't read that book. I had a major problem with a part of that book. That's Jack Welch, if you can't see it. The Rise of GE, and he did a spectacular job with GE. But guess what he had? A policy that the bottom 10% of all his employees get cut every year. He was very proud that he cut the bottom 10% of his employees every year, right? And it was this cutthroat competitiveness. Now, he got results that he wanted, and he got a ton of staff turnover. What do you think's happening with the cortisol inside of GE if you know the bottom 10% is getting cut every year? There's a lot of stress happening in that company. It's interesting because as GE was doing this meteoric rise, at the same time, Costco was coming along at an angle like this. But the problem is when Jack Welch left GE, what happened to GE? What happened to Costco? Straight through the recession. Anybody know a friend who works at Costco? They love their jobs. They love their jobs because they spend a tremendous amount of time on ESI. So a different perspective. Can we add smart to healthy or healthy to smart? Well, the answer is you can do both. If you run a very smart dealership, you can bring healthy into the fold. It's not as difficult as you might think. If you run a healthy dealership, right? I know a lot of guys that, oh man, I have zero turnover, my staff love each other, and there's nothing left in the operating gross profit, right? You got both sides of that. We can certainly bring profitability into a healthy dealership, but what do you think's easier? And I always say a child's perspective, which is, okay, Johnny over here has parents who are never home, who don't show him any love and affection, but silver spoon in his mouth, got millions of dollars, got a trust fund waiting for him. And then I have Billy over here, and Billy doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but his parents are home and love him to death. Which kid do you think is going to be more successful? I think we'd all say Billy, right? Billy would have the greater opportunity for a healthy life and having fun with his life because he'd earn it and all the reasons we talk about. So adding smart to healthy is easier than adding healthy to smart, but it can be done either way. And I'm going to give you one quick example of that. You get what you give, you attract what you are. I've always believed that. If you have staff that are always in a bad mood and walking around like, oh, I'll get to that in a second, what's that tell you about you? That's usually a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Why has Johnny always been out of shape? I don't know. Let me watch you talk to him, and I think we'll figure that out real fast. You get what you give. You don't get what you want. I want happy employees. Well, then give as if you want happy employees. The Advantage. I referenced this book earlier, okay? Patrick Lencioni. This is basically a culmination of his 4 books, the fables that he wrote earlier. Dysfunctions of a team, obsessions of a CEO, things like that. And he pulls this out again. This came out of the dysfunctions of a team, this triangle. And it's really, once you get this, you understand the framework for teamwork, okay? From the bottom up, right? The triangles are trust, conflict, or the blocks are trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. Right? The idea being if there's no trust comes from serotonin and oxytocin. If there's no camaraderie, if there's none of the engagement with your staff on the floor, if they're only there for a incentive-based pay plan, then there's no trust. That's the foundation of it all. If there's no trust, then we're fear of conflict. Like we go to the meeting and I just won't even bring it up because I know Cindy's going to throw me under the bus in the next meeting. She's going to say I did it wrong, so I just keep my mouth shut. Fear of conflict rolls into the lack of commitment. Nobody commits to a desired outcome, so eventually a general manager or somebody says, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're just going to forge forward on this. I just made the decision. Somebody makes a commitment, and as a result that nobody internally made the commitment, it was the boss man who made the commitment, then there's no accountability. And as a result, when the numbers come in, it's not my numbers. I don't know. We were trying something. Clearly, I told them all along it wasn't going to work. Get to be right. Now, you flip those around, If you do have trust, serotonin, oxytocin, if you do have trust, then you've built the foundation. Think of a foundation of a house. Then when we go to the meeting, I feel like you're not going to throw me under the bus because you're my best friend, or you're a good friend at least. So you're going to respect my opinion. You may disagree with it, but you're at least going to respect it, not embarrass me in front of my peers. Therefore, we have healthy conflict. I like going into meetings saying, tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me what I'm not doing right. Don't just take my word for it. Let's figure it out. Give me what's not working. Then we commit collectively. We throw it out on the table. We collectively commit to something. Accountability comes into place because we're all on board with a commitment that we made. It wasn't one department or one person. And then we have the results that are on top of that. Now I'm excited to see the numbers. A lot of you who are in 20 clubs are excited to get the book that comes every single month. You want to look at the numbers because you know ultimately you're accountable. I wonder if your staff feels that way. Part of the composite reports that I run management reports. Not only here's the store report, but here are the manager reports, sales managers reports. I want you to see everybody in that group. Here's what every sales department did for everyone in the group. And I want managers clamoring for the mailbox. They can't wait to get the report because they're accountable. They own their department. And it starts with the trust piece at the bottom. How do you establish the trust piece at the bottom? It's simpler than you think. Before I get to the guys from Seattle Boat, and I'm going back out there in a couple of weeks, but here's a very simple exercise. I think some of you have it in your head that, well, Sam's probably suggesting we go out into the mountains and do a bunch of ropes courses and trust falls. No, although you could do that, it'd be pretty fun. You don't need to do that. It's simple things, right? And I think about, how many of you in the room carry Cobalt? How many carry Cobalt, okay? I think about Paxson. I think about Pack and Paxson, the founders, right? Pack founded Cobalt and his son Paxson's taken it over. And if you go and walk the factory line with those guys, they know everybody's names. They know everybody's names as they walk through the factory line. They say good morning to every single one of them. Shake their hands. How's Margaret doing this morning? Oh, she okay? Oh, good. I'm glad. Hey, how's your dog doing, by the way? I forgot to ask you. Think of the message top down when those are the conversations being had, when you actually get to know your staff on that level. Now, simple exercises that I run. I told you the girl in the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation, she said they just don't want to. They just don't want to. Well, we ran an exercise, which is, what's your biggest regret and why? I had 6 managers in a room for 2 days, and we ran that exercise. What's your biggest regret and why? Right? And now some of you right now are cringing. You're like, oh, God, I don't like running those kinds of things. This is what it takes to have the vulnerability available to let trust come in. What's your biggest regret and why, right? Now I had the 21-year-old parts manager say, oh, I used to work for a guy in a construction company. I really didn't like him. I should have left sooner. I just stayed in that job longer. Okay, that's a perspective from a 21-year-old, right? We get around to Gina was her name at the time, and she said, I wish I wouldn't have had my child so early because now I'm working to support paying for the child, and I don't get to spend enough time with her. And she's crying. What do you think everyone in the room was feeling at that moment? I got you. I got you, Gina. Like, she never shared that with them before. Something that simple. A simple exercise says, what's your biggest regret and why? You go around the room. All of a sudden, somebody will lay a bomb out there like that, and the vulnerability is on the table, and people attach to that, and all of a sudden, they're best friends. Like, literally, it can happen in one meeting. I ran that same exercise when I was in Kansas City at a dealership. I went around the room with 34 different people. Same thing. Some people will say pass, but I don't have any regrets in life. It has made me the man I am today. Okay. And you keep going. And then one guy at the end of the line, he says, I regret leaving my 3-year-old in the bathtub as long as I did because now he can't hear. And I wish I got to spend more time with him. You could have heard a pin drop in the room when he said that. Right? And here's this hardcore Harley guy with tears in his eyes, and every single one of those guys was like, you ever need time off, let me know. I got it. I got it handled. Simple exercises like that cause it, gang. It's nothing big. It's nothing grand. It's actually slowing down and not being, I call it the speed of retail. You guys go to work and you're just in the speed of retail all the time. Just slow down. Have a little meeting in the morning. There's another fun one out there called Give Me 3 Truths and 1 Lie About You. And we get to guess the lie. So 3 truths and 1 lie. So you give me 4 things and I'll write up on the whiteboard and we talk about it and we say, what do you think's the lie? I think the lie is that you were in the circus. Nope, true. Ah, silly little exercises, gang, that cause vulnerability and cause people to open up. That's all it takes to get the serotonin and the oxytocin flowing. Now, this last example I'll give you was a Seattle boat. You guys aren't in here, are you? James, Alan, no? Okay. They had me out there. These guys are rock stars with CSI. And the whole gist of this, gang, is that if your ESI is there, it pours out into CSI. People want to be part of that. If 80% of people are not happy in their jobs, they go to work, they get in the car, they fight the traffic, they go to a job they don't like, and they come home and they do it all over again. So when they come to your store, not only are they looking for the boat, they're looking for the serotonin and oxytocin from you. That's what they want. How do they get it? They get it because they want to be part of the team. And when they see the team having so much fun together, they want to be part of that. And then they're more likely to send in your surveys with the 10s that you want without having to give them a Mont Blanc pen. That little course down the middle, it's just funny. This is their corporate retreat. This is their end-of-year session that they had last year. I'm going out there in a couple weeks. We're going to do it again. All of a sudden, Alan gets up in the front of the room. Thanks, guys, for this. James says a few words. James, the general manager. And then Alan, the CEO, starts going through. Here, let's go through the company financials. Full transparency. Starts going through on the board. Here's where we are. Here's the goal. God, you did such a great job. Cindy, here you go. He's just doling out $20 gift cards from all kinds of retailers all around the Seattle area. Great job, Bill. Excellent job getting that number up. Going through the reports, doling them out, okay? Everybody's having a time. Now, that little track down the middle, that's for these. Because on the breaks, they all built these little cars, okay? We separated off into teams, and it wasn't like service over there, parts over there. It's like service split up 1, 2, 3, 4, parts split up 1, 2, 3, 4, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. So he broke every department up, and they all built all these little cars, and they painted them, and they came up with crazy names. The day started with an absolute gourmet breakfast, and everybody was all enthralled with the thick-cut bacon. So they came up with a team name, and the one with the wrench in the middle was called the Baconator, right? The Baconator. Silly stuff, gang, but it got these guys together. So on every break, they go back over there, start working on the cars, putting the wheels on, engaging with the staff, having a good time. Alan goes through the financials. James goes through the direction. Here's what we're going to next year. Oh, and Alan jumps back up and says, here's the new facility we're looking at. And the place goes crazy. Let's go have lunch. They go next door to have lunch. The lunch is catered by Jubilee Reach. Jubilee Reach is an outreach program. And they take a lot of their dollars at Seattle Boat and throw it to Jubilee Reach. And Jubilee Reach is supposed to take kids who are going the wrong direction in life and bring them back on board through sports. So the guy gets up and gives an update about all these little kids that he's naming off personally about here's how we got Johnny involved, and here's how Mikey got involved, and Jerome was over here. So all their money, they're seeing the results of their money going over here to help some kids on the side. I gave up and gave a little speech on the customer experience. We raced the cars at the end of the day. Of course the wrench won. And put a bunch of weight on a car, it's going to fly down the hill. Doled out more cars throughout the end of the day. Everybody high fives. Open bar downstairs, gang. By the way, we got taxi cabs for everybody tonight. Everybody goes downstairs. We clean up the mess. James and Alan and I walk downstairs. The staff gives the general manager and the owner a standing ovation when they walk down the stairs. And I'm wondering, is that how your end-of-year parties go? Because that was really cool to watch. And it's no secret that their CSI scores are through the roof because their ESI scores are so dialed in. My last slide. So, let me walk through this, and then I'm going to put my contact information on the board, and then we'll open it up for questions that you guys have. Get the concept behind this, gang. Get the idea that there really are only 4 things that cause people to be happy. 2 of them are selfishly for you, and 2 of them are for everybody else. And right now, like the endorphins part, remember that? It's supposed to mask pain. Some of you right now are like, I got to go to the bathroom. Sam, stop talking. I got to go to the bathroom. It's okay. Your endorphins are kicking in. You're going to be all right. Your dopamine, you're tasting the coffee and the food that's waiting for you right now. It's right there. You're getting a little bit of dopamine hit because you know we're a lot closer to the dopamine. It's coming. Hang on. Dopamine's going through your brain right now. Guess what else is going through your brain? Serotonin. Because you brought yourself to a seminar when you could be walking around. You didn't even have to come to Orlando, but you brought yourself here. So you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself coming here, wanting to take better care of your staff. It's a prideful thing. You should be prideful. So you got serotonin racing through your blood right now. This is the 3rd time I've come to speak to you guys, right? So that slow drip of oxytocin's happening right now. And when you fill out perfect 5s on your surveys, I'll be back next year to do it again. We have more oxytocin flowing. All right, let's open this thing up to questions. I'm going to put my information on the board. I've also got cards down front for any of you guys. What kind of questions do you have? No silly questions. As in there are no, not don't ask any. We got one right up front. You got the mic? Oh, we got the mic. Hang on.
My husband has this philosophy that if he gets too close to his employees, then he kind of loses the boss kind of relationship with them.
If you get too close to your employees, you lose the boss relationship with them.
Kind of, then when you have to say the hard stuff, it's harder to do that.
Okay, it's interesting because I feel like when you have to say the hard stuff, it's easier when I know you. And I think the real difference is when you see a young manager going out with the employees, that's a different scenario. I am not in favor of you guys going out and having, just on the side, going out and having beers with the employees. As a company event, that's one thing. We do it on the weekends and Saturday, it's not. Because it is harder because they see you as their peer and they don't see you as the manager.
Right.
But when you're the manager, you and I can have a relationship and I can know about your family and your kids and your dog and the lake house and I can ask you about that, but we don't have to have the social side when we walk out in the building like we're going out and going for a party or dinner or something like that. Okay. So I really think there's a separation between the two.
There should be.
There should be a separation between the two, yes. What else? One right there? Okay. In the work environment, you can't go too far with an employee. Is that your question?
Yeah, well, my question would be more like, how far is appropriate to go with an employee? But are you saying that you can go pretty far, to get to know a person pretty much?
Yeah, the question was how far can you go with an employee?
Yeah,
right?
Where it's appropriate.
Yeah, where it's appropriate. How far would you go with your best friend? Okay,
yeah,
dial that down one notch.
Okay.
I don't want you going out and getting blitzkrieg with your employees, but getting to know them on a personal level in the environment inside the store. There's just no harm in that. I've talked before about the logo. I built my entire company around a logo that's got a bulldog in the middle of it. What does a bulldog have to do with dealership training? Nothing. But he was my best friend before I had a wife and a kid. The fact that you know that and we end up having a conversation about bulldogs, as silly and superficial as that seems, releases serotonin and dopamine, or serotonin and oxytocin between the two of us. Does that make sense? You really want that bond, gang. Your staff understands. If something happens and you have to cut them loose or something goes down, they do understand. But if they're constantly in a state of, you're up there and I don't even know who you are and I don't get to know you, then there's a stressful environment. You have cortisol all the time. It's not worth it. It's a good question. So on the other hand, on this side. No? Is that like, please stop talking, I need some food? All right, with that, gang, enjoy the rest of MDCE and hope that I find a flask on my way to Disney. All right? Thank you for sitting in.